The Sangre de Cristo Mountains of Colorado are unforgiving in December. For me, Chief Petty Officer Mason Reed, the isolation of my remote cabin outside Crestone was exactly what the Navy psychiatrist had ordered. After 12 years, 4 combat deployments, and the loss of 3 men in my platoon, my soul was as fractured as the icy crags around my property. I was on mandatory 60-day decompression leave, living on black coffee, chopped firewood, and a dangerous amount of silence. The blizzard had been raging 2 straight days, dropping 40 inches of powder and driving the temperature to 20 below. The wind sounded like a freight train tearing through the pines. I was sitting by the stone fireplace, staring into the flames, when I heard it. Scratch. Whimper. Scratch. Faint, barely cutting through the wind. My head snapped up, instincts honed by years in the teams, flaring instantly. I crossed the floor in 3 silent strides, grabbed the heavy iron handle, and yanked the door open. Snow whipped into the cabin, blinding me. When my eyes adjusted, I looked down. Lying on the frost-heaved planks of my porch was a dog, but not some local stray off a neighboring ranch. A Belgian Malinois, her fawn coat matted with ice, curled into a shivering ball, her breath coming in ragged rasps, and her belly massive, heavily pregnant. Jesus, I breathed, dropping to my knees. She was rigid, her body temperature critically low. Her amber eyes flickered up to me, glassy and unfocused, but she didn't bare her teeth. There was a desperate, trusting surrender in her gaze that hit me like a physical blow. I slipped my arms under her, 70 pounds of muscle and unborn pups, lifted her, and kicked the door shut against the storm. The cabin was a balmy 70 degrees, but I knew from my casualty care training that warming a hypothermic body too fast can trigger shock and cardiac arrest. So I bypassed the fire and laid her on a thick wool rug in the center of the room, where the air was warm but not hot. Hang in there, girl. I've got you. I murmured, my voice rough from disuse. I moved with the same precision I used in a hot landing zone, towels to rub the eyes from her coat, checking her capillary refill by pressing her pale gums. Dangerously slow, her pulse a thready flutter. From my med kit, I pulled chemical heating pads, wrapped them in washcloths, and placed them in her armpits and groin, then draped a mylar thermal blanket over her swollen belly. The whole time, my mind kept circling the same wall of disbelief. A dog this deep in hypothermia, this pregnant, doesn't crawl 5 miles up a snowed-in road. Somebody had carried her most of the way. Somebody had wanted her found, and found here. For 3 hours, I didn't leave her side. I sat cross-legged on the floor in the firelight, listening to the wind hammer the shutters, offering her drops of honey water from a syringe, and counting her breaths the way I'd once counted a wounded man's. Slowly, the color came back into her gums. Slowly, her body stopped fighting itself. Around 3 a.m., she let out a deep, shuddering sigh. The violent shivering subsided into steady breathing. She lifted her head, her eyes clearer, and looked at me. She didn't cower. She deliberately shifted her weight, extended her snout, and rested her chin heavily on my knee. My breath caught. That wasn't just affection. It was a deep-pressure grounding technique trained in military working dogs for handlers suffering combat stress. Frowning, I stroked her head, my fingers trailing down to her right ear, wiping away the last grime from the inner flap. And there it was, faint blue ink tattooed into the skin. Alphanumeric, K419. I sat back, the blood draining from my face, the breath knocked out of me like I'd taken a round to the plate. I knew that tattoo. Every operator in my team knew that tattoo. K419 was Echo, but Echo was dead. Echo had been the premier explosive detection and apprehension K9 of my platoon, partnered with Petty Officer First Class Danny Vasquez, my best friend and spotter. We'd come up through the teams together, stood at each other's weddings, traded letters from opposite sides of the same war. 3 years ago, during a catastrophic night raid in Helmand, our helicopter took an RPG. Danny was killed instantly. In the firefight, Echo, who'd been tethered to him, was unclipped to defend the perimeter. The last I saw her, she was taking down an insurgent near a raging river. An explosion ripped through the bank, and she vanished into the dark water. We searched for days, longer than the brass wanted us to. She was officially declared killed in action, and a part of me had been carrying that loss like a stone ever since. One more name on a list, I couldn't stop reciting at 3 in the morning. I stared at the pregnant dog on my rug, my hands trembling as I traced the ink again. A little grayer at the muzzle, carrying the scars of untold trauma, but it was Echo. "How are you here?" I whispered. She whined softly, thumping her tail, and the questions hit me all at once. How does a dog lost in a war zone 6,000 miles away survive? How does she end up in the U.S.? Who got her pregnant? And most chilling of all, my cabin sits at the end of a private 5-mile dirt road, currently buried under 3 feet of snow. Echo hadn't wandered here by accident. Someone had brought her. Someone had driven through a blizzard and left a pregnant, highly decorated military working dog on my porch. By daybreak, the storm broke, leaving a blindingly white, silent world. Echo was stable enough to walk, though her back legs were shaky. I loaded her into the heated cab of my modified Raptor and drove the treacherous path straight to the only vet clinic in town. Dr. Hannah Brooks was already shoveling her walkway when I roared in. She'd patched up my hunting dogs before. One look at Echo, and she prepped the table. Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, heavily pregnant. Her pads are cracked and bleeding. She walked miles on ice or was locked in a freezer. "Check her ear," I said, jaw tight. Hannah lifted the flap and paused. A military tattoo. "Mason, is she yours?" "She was my teammate's. Kia, 3 years ago in Afghanistan." Hannah froze, realizing the impossibility. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Scan her." She ran a universal microchip scanner over the dog's scruff. It beeped, and a 15-digit sequence flashed up. She typed it into the Federal Registry. A red banner popped up. Classified asset, Department of Defense. Status, Kia. Handler, Dani Voskus. "My God," she whispered. "It's her." The ultrasound showed 5 distinct sacs, strong heartbeats, skeletons calcified, very close to term. She could go into labor any day. "Mason," Hannah said quietly, "how does a dead military dog from Afghanistan end up pregnant in Colorado?" "I don't know, but whoever brought her here knows exactly who I am, and exactly who she is." I stepped out the back into the freezing air and pulled my encrypted satellite phone, dialing a secure line to base. It rang twice. "Rollins." "Commander, it's Chief Reed. I need the after-action report from Operation Dust Veil, the Hellman raid." "Danny Foshkeshop." A long pause. "Why are you digging into that, Mason?" "We lost good men that night." "Because I'm looking at Danny's dog. I'm looking at Echo. She was dumped on my porch last night, pregnant and half frozen." The silence was deafening. When Commander Rollins finally spoke, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Reed, that's not unlikely. That's physically impossible. A local recovery team found her remains 3 miles downstream a week after the raid. I saw the photographs. We buried her collar at the memorial." The cold suddenly felt a lot colder. "Sir, what are you saying?" "I'm saying if the dog in front of you is Echo, then whatever we pulled out of that river was a plant. And whoever's had her for the last 3 years has been hiding a highly classified military asset. Secure the dog. Trust no one. I'm sending a team right now." I hung up and looked back through the glass. Echo was sitting up, staring past me with a low, rumbling growl at a black, unmarked SUV that had just pulled into the empty lot across the street. The mystery hadn't just begun. It had followed us here. Tinted windows, heavy suspension, run-flat tires, no front plate. Private military contractor or a black ops detail. Echo remembered them. I sprinted back inside. "Hannah, lock the front door, kill the lobby lights. Now." I wrapped Echo's leash twice around my hand. "Lock the back too. Stay away from the windows." Through the blinds, I watched 2 men step out of the SUV in expensive parkas, moving with the rigid, synchronized discipline of trained operators. Fists pounded the glass. "Open up. Federal agents. We need to inspect this facility for a biological hazard." "Those aren't federal agents," I told Hannah. I knew the playbook. A plausible excuse to force entry, recover the dog, eliminate witnesses. If they got their hands on Echo and her pups, she'd vanish forever. I couldn't let them trap us in here with Hannah at risk. I needed open space and the armor of my truck. Doc, hide in the radiology room behind the lead line door. Don't come out until I say. I drew my concealed pistol and looked down at Echo. Ready to go to work, girl? Her ears pinned back. She gave a sharp affirmative rough. I kicked the side exit open. The two operatives whipped around, hands diving into their parkas. Drop the weapon, one yelled, pulling a suppressed Glock. You're out of your jurisdiction, gentlemen, I said, moving laterally. The second man lunged for Echo's leash. Secure the asset. Before he could touch it, Echo erupted. Heavily pregnant, 3 years of brutal captivity behind her, the hypothermia still in her, and the training hardwired into her brain activated anyway. She launched, jaws clamping his coat, dragging him off balance, and slamming him into the snowy pavement. Get her off. The first man raised his weapon toward her. I didn't hesitate. 2 suppression shots into the SUV's engine block. The driver flinched and ducked. That half-second was all I needed. I yanked Echo off the down man, hoisted her into the Raptor, vaulted in, and tore out the lot. In the mirror, the 2 men scrambled back into their damaged SUV. I hit redial. Rollins, we have contact. 2 hostiles, PMC profile. They try to take Echo. We're mobile, heading to my cabin. Only defensible high ground. Copy. Listen, I ran a deep dive on Dust Veil. The recovery team that found Echo's body was funded by Shadow Corporation, Sentinel Dynamics. Biosecurity specialists. Why fake a dog's death? Genetics, Mason. Echo wasn't just a good sniffer. She was part of a DARPA breeding program, Project Hellhound. A rare genetic mutation makes her immune to specific chemical nerve agents. They didn't just want her. They wanted her bloodline. They've been holding her at a black site, waiting for her to breed with a compatible male. She must have escaped when the storm hit. I looked over. Echo was panting hard, eyes wide, pawing frantically at the blankets. Commander, where's that reaction force? Task Force Trident is wheels up. ETA, 45 minutes. Can you hold them off? I don't have a choice, I said softly. Echo's going into labor. By the time the Raptor skidded to a halt in front of my cabin, she was actively contracting, whining, her body rigid with pain. I carried her inside and laid her by the fireplace, stoked the embers with cedar until a roaring fire pushed back the chill, and surrounded her with clean towels and warm water. Good girl, you're safe now. But I knew that safety was an illusion. They tracked us. I moved mechanically, deadbolt steel storm shutters, my customized rifle out of the safe, armor-piercing rounds into the magazines, motion sensor trail cameras outside, feeding a tablet on my counter. I ran the cabin in my head the way I'd run 100 objectives, avenues of approach, choke points, fallback positions. Front driveway, open and exposed. Rear mudroom, a weak seam. Every window a liability. But I had the high ground, the cold, and a structure I'd reinforce myself, and I had something they didn't, a reason to die on that floor if it came to it. Then I went back to Echo. She gave a sudden violent heave, and a small dark shape in a translucent sack slipped onto the towels. I dropped the rifle and dropped to my knees. She was too weak to tear the sack herself. I got it, Mama. Using my thumbs, I tore the membrane, wiped the fluid from the pup's nose and mouth, and massaged its chest until I heard a tiny high-pitched squeak. I set the newborn at her belly. She weakly licked it, maternal instinct overriding her trauma. Beep. The tablet flashed red. Through the grainy night vision feed, I saw not 2, but 5 heavily armed men advancing up my driveway, through knee-deep snow. Leading them was a face I recognized from intelligence dossiers, Victor Crane, a disgraced former intelligence operative who now ran Sentinel Dynamics. A megaphone boomed through the wind. Chief Reed, this is Victor Crane. You're harboring stolen corporate property. Send the dog out and we walk away. Make this difficult, and we burn the cabin down with you inside. I grabbed my radio, broadcasting on the open frequency I knew they were monitoring. Crane, this dog belongs to the United States Navy, and her handler gave his life for this country. You want her? Come and get her. Breach it. Gunfire erupted, heavy rounds slamming into the reinforced logs. I stayed low, moving to the gun port I'd built into the front door, and fired 3 controlled bursts, dropping the 2 men carrying a battering ram. Behind me, Echo yelped, a second puppy, and she was handling this one herself, tearing the sack. "Hold the line, Echo." Crash. The back door splintered as an operative kicked it in. I spun, raised smoothly, and put 2 rounds into his chest plate. He staggered back into the snow. Crane realized a frontal assault was failing. "Gas him out." A silver canister crashed through the chimney vent and clattered into the fireplace, thick yellow smoke billowing into the room. CS gas. My eyes burned, my throat seized. I strapped on my gas mask, but Echo and the pups had no protection. The gas would kill the newborns in minutes. I grabbed a fire iron, scooped the hissing canister out of the flames, hurled it back up the chimney, and threw the damper wide open to suck the smoke out. Then a shadow loomed in the shattered back doorway. Crane himself, rifle raised, aimed directly at my back. Before I could turn, a blur of fawn and black launched across the room. Echo, having just delivered her 3rd puppy, threw her 70 pounds through the air. She didn't bite his arm. She hit him square in the chest like a battering ram, and they tumbled backward out the door into the snow. "Echo, no." I ripped off my mask and rushed the doorway. Crane scrambled up, bringing his sidearm toward the dog. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The deafening roar of rotor blades shook the pines. A black hawk descended from the storm, its searchlight blinding Crane. "Drop the weapon. This is the United States military." Task Force Trident had arrived. Red laser sights peppered Crane's chest. Outgunned, he slowly lowered his weapon and dropped to his knees. SEALs fast roped down and secured Crane and his surviving men. I ignored all of it, sprinting out into the snow and dropping beside Echo. She lay on her side, panting, exhausted. "I've got you," I whispered, tears mixing with melting snow on my face, and carried her back into the warm cabin. By sunrise, the property was crawling with federal agents and military police. Crane's black market biosecurity ring was completely dismantled, the evidence of his treason undeniable. Inside the quiet, warm cabin, I sat cross-legged on the floor. Echo was curled on a clean bed, nursing 5 healthy, squeaking puppies. Commander Rollins stood in the doorway with a steaming mug of coffee. Doc Brooks checked them out. "All perfectly healthy." "You did good, Reed." "She did the hard work," I said, petting Echo's head. I reached out and picked up the firstborn, the one I'd helped deliver. As I turned the tiny squirming ball of fur over, I noticed a distinct marking on its chest, a patch of white fur in the exact shape of a jagged star. My breath caught. Danny, my fallen brother, had a jagged star tattooed on his left shoulder. "You see that, Reed?" Rollins asked softly. "Yeah," I whispered, pulling the puppy to my chest. The crushing weight of grief that had anchored me to this mountain for months finally began to lift, replaced by something else, purpose. Danny was gone, but his legacy had survived the fire, the ice, and the worst of humanity. "What are you going to name him?" Rollins asked. I looked at the puppy, then at the fierce, brave mother who had crossed mountains to bring him home. "I'm going to name him Vasquez," I said, smiling for the first time in years. "And he's staying right here with me." If Echo's story of survival, loyalty, and justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and share it with a friend. This is why we honor our military and the brave dogs who serve beside them. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable real-life story. What would you have done in my shoes? Let us know in the comments below.